Hi, I'm the Wrong Hero, and this is the latest and greatest of my ongoing series on politics, and it's called Lip Service. And it's number 22 in a series. What I was hoping to conclude at number 24, but it might go all the way to number 27, you never know. Of course, you know, in the old days, 26 shows. That was the television year. So I have a whole season's worth of programming, and as you probably are well aware, if you ever watch deplorable programs like Saturday Night Live, it's very difficult to come up with an hour and a half of new material every stinking week, so I don't even bother. Get out of here. I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to the dog, who, of course, at the very moment when I'm unable to pay any attention to her, that's the very moment she decides she wants my attention. Hey, get out of there. Don't you get on that bed. Get off of there. Sit. Go sit down. Sit. Get over there. Hey. See, when you tell her she can't sit on the sofa, that's when she wants to sit on it. And when you tell her to sit on the sofa, that's the very moment she decides she does not wish to do so. Can't win. Sorry about this. Well, at least it's an exciting change of pace from having to look at different footage, isn't it? Well, anyway, I know that a lot of people aren't really very interested in politics, so I thought maybe I'd start with a few jokes. You know, when I was born, I slapped the doctor. What a childhood. I had to breastfeed my mother. When I was born, doctor told my mother, "You're very lucky. He's a 12-pound boy and he almost killed you. Now you can spend the rest of your life getting back at him." Yeah, well, anyway, when I was born, not only did I smack the doctor, I smacked a few nurses in the bargain. Well, anyway, I don't know. This is tiresome. I'm not even going to do this. I'm sick of it. I don't like that kind of formulaic humor. No, I'd rather rely upon humor which isn't really humor at all. I'm a member of an organization called Alcoholics Inventive. That's right, we invent new ways to blame our problems on our alcoholism instead of ourselves. So, with that in mind, let us continue on with the magnificent new Wrong Hero production, which he performs for you at great emotional cost to himself, entitled Lip Service. You know, the thing is, some of this programming, it's been kind of irregular. That's because the station sees fit to sometimes yank my programs, not because of their incredibly controversial nature, but because of the technical ineptitude in which I practice my trade. However, I don't believe they'll have cause to find anything seriously wrong with this tape, so you can expect this tape to proceed on schedule as originally intended. You know, the real problem is, sorry to have to keep getting up like this, and sorry that you had to get this bird's eye view of my crotch. The real problem is that the camera keeps losing its ability to detect light, and so I've got to constantly fiddle with it, which is really ridiculous. I mean, do I have to keep like a strong light on it at all times in order for it to work? It's a good thing I checked too. The whole thing would have been in total darkness. There we go. See, you got this strong source of light. You know, now it works, but if I don't have this strong source, if I don't have it pointed directly at a strong source of light, then it's not going to work, and the whole thing will be like useless. And I got to figure out how I'm going to do this. I guess I could put on every light in the house. and hope that it will suffice. But it didn't work before, so I don't see why it should work now. Well, looking at a lamp, I guess, is better than staring at my grizzly mug. So, gee, I don't know what to do about this. I suppose I could bring a chair in or something, or sit on a stool for 2 hours and wax hemi-demi prophetic. Or I could try doing something which goes back to a long line of traditional endeavors, and that is actually stand up while doing this. Isn't that, wouldn't that be called for somewhat? I mean, this is supposed to be stand up, right? I'll give it a shot. I'm always willing to try anything once. You know, I haven't actually even gotten to any of the material yet. How long have I been yammering on here? A good 7 minutes. See, now most people would be done by now. I'm just getting warmed up, in the words of the immortal Al Pacino in an otherwise forgettable movie called Scent of a Woman, which has basically a somewhat distasteful. But that was an inspiring scene. The poor, friendless prep school boy on scholarship. He doesn't have any defenders, and but he's noble of mind and heart, and he's not a hypocrite and all that other stuff that young people are often to be praised for. Who should appear but the colonel himself in his full regalia, or whatever he was, a general, or whatever the hell. Well, even though it requires me to sit rigidly and put my enormous bloated face directly into yours, and I can barely so much as look down to check out my text, and it makes me particularly cognizant of the fact that I say and error and like a lot, and well, you know that actually this is going to work out. I know it is, because now I have a little table. I can put it directly at eye level, more or less, and then, oopsie. I just got to be extra careful not to bump the camera, because, now where are we? Oh yeah, the big sensation just before Diana bit the dust was that Versace was shot dead. Now, that was kind of, a real 9 days wonder. Now, who would do such a thing? Why, of course, a nationally acclaimed serial killer. Wow, things are just getting nuttier and nuttier. And Mike Tyson bites that guy's ear. And anyway, this has little to do with politics, however. So, well, as Shakespeare put it, the path is smooth that leadeth to danger. And, there's some cool things about the various presidential candidates cited in The Economist. Forbes eats his food like a robot. Lamar Alexander, his strength is that consultants can mold him into anything. Phil Graham spends $20 million of other people's money to persuade the public of his fiscal prudence. I'm sorry, I'm looking away here, and I shouldn't be. Hollowness is apparently an advantage, according to The Economist. Why do people do things like this? I mean, have cable access shows? I overheard some people excitedly talking, not once but twice, in a supermarket about the fact that their pals had been on cable TV. And it's like, wow, I mean, this is the kind of thing that impresses people who work in supermarkets. Yeah, I mean, it's not anything. And one time I was in Livy's Liquors back when I still drank, which was a long time ago, and this guy comes up to me and goes, "Yeah, fight the cops, yeah!" So, I mean, and people who hang out at liquor stores, waiting for it to open, first thing in the morning. I mean, those are the kind of people who watch cable TV. Drunks, basically. It's like, at 4 in the morning, who's watching? Drunks, as Lenny Bruce put it. People cacked out of their skulls. So, anyway, of course, our fine programming doesn't broadcast at 4 a.m., although it easily could. But, I mean, where could you possibly find program even more marginal than the programming you're watching right now to be broadcast at 4 a.m.? I mean, what kind of program would that be? Muhammad Speaks, sheep shearing at home, I mean, you name it. Anyway, according to The Economist, I'm not quite sure who they're citing here, Um, but it says, a free man with a heart of gold can never win the presidency. You know, I'm becoming heartily tired of talking about politics, especially like well after, almost a year after the election. It really is kind of discouraging. I'm even beginning to bore myself, Jack. Um, yes, how amusing. You know, I was having this really weird little fit of I don't know, uh, this little fugue, I guess you'd call it, where um, I was eating some Golden's mustard, and I think it said something like honey brown on the label, and I suddenly transmogrified into a Delta blues musician circa 1930, and I was going like, that sweet little honey brown, you ain't done nothing till you've been with that sweet little honey brown. Anyway, that's a voice to frighten small children, and there might be small children actually watching this. Although, you shouldn't let your small children watch this, because it might frighten them. It might forever warp their young and impressionable minds. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a man who sticks vegetables up his nose. To quote from King of the Hill. I just saw the second show of the second season. Well, it's marginally better. I mean, there's some more stuff about the adulterous Indian, and but there's hardly ever any black people in this program. I mean, blink and you miss them, right? Maybe some of the footage of the University of Ireland, clearly meant to represent the University of Austin campus. That maybe we saw a brief one-frame glimpse of a person of color, right? Not counting the Korean guy they have there as a sort of symbolic substitute for a black man, and of course not counting the American Indian either. And you hardly ever see any Hispanic people on the show either. Now that I think of it, I mean, you know, Peggy Hill teaches Spanish, right? But that's different from actually having Hispanic people on there. I mean, occasionally someone will make a somewhat liberal comment, which is meant to give us all some, you know, food for thought. But it's a very strange show, and the person and the people who sponsor it, the United States Army. I mean, come on. It's not exactly a cutting-edge program anymore when the United States Army decides that they're going to sponsor it. But, you know, it's typical Fox. Take something like that and make it so thoroughly mainstream. Of course, it's not really Fox's fault either now, is it? No, I think it has more to do with Mike Judge, who was sick of being thought of as, oh, he's that Beavis and Butthead guy. And so he decided to do something like nauseatingly conventional as a kind of his revenge, I suppose. Because then all those people, all those stupid people who think Beavis and Butthead is really great. Well, it is kind of. You know, then they'd be watching the show eagerly, waiting to see, you know, that kid. There's one kid on King of the Hill who crops up and says stuff like, "Your wife divorced you," but sort of like little Ralph on The Simpsons, and ha ha. But oh, and The Simpsons. I mean, don't get me started on The Simpsons. The Simpsons is generally good for one laugh, but then again, so is the Beverly Hillbillies. Occasionally, you know, there's something really good. And now they're backdating it. They're saying that Bart Simpson was born circa 1986, whereas the show began more or less in 1989. So I don't know. I mean, they're screwing with the chronology here. So, because Bart was 8 in 1989 when the show began, now they're saying Bart was 5 in 1990. So that meant he was 4 in 1988. And anyway, why would anybody give a 3-year-old infant a saxophone? That's the other thing I need to know about. Anyway, I could poke critiques at these shows, but it won't do any good. And besides, I'm supposed to be talking about politics here. Not only that, but I need more coffee. And I gotta check the camera. If it's not one damn thing, it's another. Pardon my French. Oh, good. The light's still working. I don't know if you can actually see me or not. I mean, I more or less have a pretty good idea that you can, because, but am I really sitting at that level? You see the bare naked bum of the, let's get a tighter shot of this, so to speak. Ooh, this is really the reason why you shouldn't let your kids watch this show. Oh God, you know what? I've had this on like the lowest setting the whole time. Whoops. There we go. Now isn't that much better? Look at that look at that incredibly realistic detail. Would you believe this is not a bachelor pad, my girlfriend? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. The light's giving away. The light's fading. Now I've done it. I shouldn't have fiddled with it. Now I'm gonna have to answer for this. See what happens when you fool with stuff. This camera. I mean, you have got to be kidding me with this camera. I mean, there's got to be some sort of way to get this thing to work better. I don't know why it's giving me, that is, so much trouble. Look at that. I mean, this light is incredibly bright, right? I mean, albeit I have it on the lowest possible exposure, the shutter speed, but it's getting progressively darker, even though I'm focusing more and more on the light. See that? I am directly glaring, I'm directly gazing into an incandescent bulb. You would think that it would be, whoa, it's so incredibly bright, see? But look at how unbright it is. It should be a lot brighter than that. There shouldn't be this, I don't know, maybe I have to hold a flashlight up to my face. What's this? Is there a message on the phone?
Margie, this is your brother, Dave. Hello? Hi, Margie. It's Auntie Betty.
Notice how Margie abruptly snatches up the phone when it's somebody she wants to talk to. I hate to have all this dead air. I mean, I suppose I could put some music on or something. That's funny though, because I thought the camera was working fine, and then all of a sudden.
Margie, this is your brother, Dave. Hello? Hi, Margie. It's Auntie Betty.
See, I'm going to catch holy hell from the little lady, because it was Auntie Betty's birthday party on Saturday, and I didn't get down until they were just about getting ready to leave. So, she was kind of steamed at me for that. It's like, you told me you'd be down, rah, rah, rah. And it's like, well, baby, I had things to do. I had to see a man about a dog. And she said, don't you give me that pimp talk now. No, she didn't actually say that. So, anyway, geez, this is, what's the chronology here? You might be interested to know. Well, we're in the approximate vicinity of mid-July of 1997. See, we're getting closer and closer to, God, this is like, anyway, it's like July 28th, we're in that vicinity. Here we go. In pursuit of the meager gains brought by continuing high levels of immigration, we are risking balkanization, says one bigot, in National Review, of course. So where else, right? Of course, the immigrants have always been the backbone of this country, and this country was founded on immigration. There are two Governor Welds. Oh, here we go. Finally we get into the whole Governor Weld flap, right? Well, we all know the result. We all know the outcome. It was pretty interesting, while it lasted. Um, but it couldn't last forever. You know that sooner or later, it was either shit or get off the pot. God, I gotta start going back to actually recording over existing footage because I don't know for a certainty whether or not you can actually see anything, let alone my smiling face. I mean, this is kind of bright, isn't it? I should have it on a lower setting. Well, I just hope that it gives you enough residual light to see my smiling face. And if not, well, I guess live and learn. There are two Governor Welds. This echoes the statement made about Wordsworth, incidentally. There are two Wordsworths. One summons the voice of the vasty deep. The other is a dull, monotonous, articulate old sheep. There are two Governor Welds. The first is a witty, affable intellect, a party maverick who has set out on an uncharted course and who refuses to be limited by principles, which he calls ideology. The second is a shrewd, calculating politician who eschews principle at the slightest hint of resistance. He is a fan of the big politics prop that will pacify critics with the least amount of effort. He uses the Republican Party to advance his career, often by poking it in the eyes. His degree of responsiveness to the Boston Globe was amazing. So much for that. Yes, the National Review, predictably enough, by someone named Justin G. Maiona, whoever that is, an Italian turncoat, writing in an anti-immigration publication. So, let's see. Should the United States need to be defended against an invasion? Fortifications should be constructed along a line that ran from Albany through Pittsburgh and Atlanta through Houston, then up the spines of the western mountain ranges, McCormick later advised. McCormick was the head of the Chicago Tribune. I just found that interesting, that's all. See, there was a recent biography about him. It's funny how history and how popular history works. Basically, someone comes out with a definitive biography of a hitherto nearly forgotten person or incident, and then for about the next 3 weeks or so, the news cycle endlessly launders, relaunders, cycles and recycles the same bon mots about the individual or institution that scholars have been aware of for years. The Chicago Tribune was known as a megaphone to amplify the publisher's caprices, as opposed to those newspapers where, it's all just market share, and there's nothing to do with the publisher's caprices. And I guess there are increasingly more of those types of newspapers, but back in the good old days, papers in the United States were essentially just political organs, and eventually they became money-making enterprises led by a strong, charismatic, politically committed publisher who set the tone for the paper. And then, of course, the publisher's heirs carried on, and they weren't quite as resolute, perhaps, and eventually it came down to the point where it was just a money-making operation, and it wasn't really run by the original owners at all, but basically by the business department. McCormick is of that era, of course, that the strong son of a strong, resolute publisher. McCormick of the Chicago Tribune, it seemed, needed enemies, it seemed, the way most men need friends. At home in his own mind and nowhere else. He referred to England, even though he was educated there, as a chalk-cliffed hell inhabited by pink-coated, horn-blowing, supercilious bankrupts. So, it's not a bad little string of rhetoric. It rattles and rackets along like a string of firecrackers. Oh, here we go. Faubus. Not long ago was the 40th anniversary of Little Rock and the Little Rock High School integration crisis, for which the United States National Guard had to be mobilized, much to Eisenhower's dismay, predictably enough. Yeah, Eisenhower didn't want to have to send in the Guard. God, talk about making sure that the Republican Party was not going to have any effective power in the South for a good 10 years. That was one way of virtually guaranteeing it, until Lyndon Johnson came along, of course, and screwed things up for the Democrats even worse. The Republicans decided, the South decided, well, we can't do much worse than these damn Democrats who turned around and stabbed us in the back. We're going to have to go to where the votes are, or to where the people, we're going to have to go to people who care about where the votes are. Falbus, Governor Falbus, he was the governor at the time of the Little Rock, Arkansas. He more or less precipitated this crisis. No commentator about this Little Rock thing has mentioned Charles Mingus's magnificent Fables of Falbus, which I highly recommend you look up. There is a two-record set called Mingus in Europe, and the version of Fables of Falbus on that, it'll just blow your mind. Anyway, Falbus is a classic American tragedy of the clash between idealism and ambition, and a cautionary tale of the corrupting power of money. Initially a populist, he had refused to condemn the Supreme Court's decision in Brown versus Topeka Board of Education, but went on to become one of the most sordid practitioners of the dark arts of racist politics. So you see how the news works. I mean, it's anniversaries, and they dredge up stuff about, hitherto unrevealed knowledge about the Cuban Missile Crisis or the Little Rock, Arkansas crisis, or it's someone comes out with a definitive biography, or even they're going to show on Arts and Entertainment's channel, they're going to show a biography of Wallace. So then all the learned pundits trot out their notes from college history and political science, and they basically ape what their professors said 30 years ago, back when this stuff was contemporaneous. And that is, if they were organized enough to keep their notes. And then they become incredibly wise pundits on the basis of knowledge that is 30 years old. God, this camera's filthy. It really needs to be cleaned. But I'm afraid. I mean, it's on its last legs. You can obviously tell. It keeps fading in and out. At least the sound works. I could always use it to overdub over existing footage, but I'm running out of existing footage. So if any of you out there in TV land have any existing footage, preferably a 2-hour tape which is completely filled with existing footage, by all means, drop it off at the station and label it care of the wrong hero, and it'll get to me eventually. It just shows on its last legs, can't you tell? I'm going to start running reruns pretty soon, because I got 150 wrong heroes in the can here. And so, why shouldn't I just sit back on my laurels for a while? And eventually, I suppose, Noise Party will be the programming which follows this once they get their timer working. I can't believe they don't have their timer working. I know they have their timer working. It's just their way of getting rid of the program without actually saying as much. That's ridiculous. Why should I have to put up with this indignity? I'm going to have to give them a telephone call. I said to them, you are going to notify me once you get your timer working again. They haven't called me yet, and here it is, the 20th of October. How long is it going to be until they get their timer working? That doesn't make sense to me. I'll bet it's already working. I'm going to have to get on the stick and talk to these folks. Anyway, comfortable good old boy arrangements have characterized politics in Little Rock for several generations. Yes, our president, Bill Clinton, spent a good deal of time in Little Rock. God, his voice is so infinitely caricaturable. It's funny how that works. Kennedy's broad Massachusetts accent, LBJ's sort of down-home kind of country hick accent, Richard Nixon's, roughy, almost dog-like heavy basso profundo. Well, Gerald Ford wasn't in long enough for a recognizable caricature to have developed, and Jimmy Carter's reedy Southern Baptist revival preacher voice, and Ronald Reagan's, well, back to the Nixon sort of basso. George Bush's high, reedy, nah, 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 nah. And then now we have Bill Clinton, well, this kind of Southern light. Why is it that the only Democrats that ever get elected are goddamn Southern hicks? Why can't we, or at the very best, Midwestern hicks? We haven't had an Eastern Democrat in there since Roosevelt, for the love of Pete. And even he liked to hang around in Warm Springs, Georgia. And then before him, who was there? Wilson? He was a Southerner. Grover Cleveland? Oh, give me a break. See, it's just not fair. Not fair at all. George McGovern didn't have a chance, even though he was from South Dakota or something. And Mike Dukakis? Oh, please. You're like the only Democrat we've had in living memory who's not been from the South has been John F. Kennedy. No, indeed, it's just not fair. And of course, he was a Catholic. And you know, as far as I'm concerned, Kennedy was kind of like a Republican. I mean, he didn't really represent that severe a difference from Nixon. If Nixon had been elected, who knows? It might have been just about the same. Except Nixon probably would have dropped bombs on Cuba when he found out about the Russian buildup down there. He wouldn't have waited. You know, he wouldn't have had this blockade. He wouldn't have listened to Adlai Stevenson. Maybe he would have had a nervous breakdown trying to decide the Cuban Missile Crisis. He never was the most stable of individuals. I was reading some stuff about Nixon. Boy, I'll tell you, maybe it would be worth, since this is an ostensibly political program. Also, I got to check the camera. I got to keep checking the camera. Good. It's working. We're in our first half hour. This is Noise Party. No, I'm sorry. It's Cafe Cabaret. Call your station and demand that they put Noise Party back on the air. An incredibly self-serving thing to say, but I just thought I'd say it anyway. This book I'm reading, I can never seem to find it. It's one of those thin books that's longer. That's like. And I keep misplacing it. It's called, If You Don't Have Anything Nice to Say, Come Sit Next to Me. It's a book of quotations. And it has several factual errors in it. It misspells Eugene O'Neill's name as Neal. Let's see if it does so in the index. Well, it doesn't refer to him at all in the index, unless there's another guy named Eugene O'Neal, which I doubt there is. Nor do they refer to him in the index at all. How could he make such a mistake, such a blatant error? And some of the quotations seem somewhat suspect to me. This does not seem to be the product of great thought. It's more like one of those books that's like slapped together. This is a, see now this book would be filed by title because it's a compilation, right? 1. Celebrities, these are the content notes. 1. Celebrities, quotations, maxims, etc. Roman numeral 1, amende coro. Roman numeral 2, if you don't have anything nice to say. Library of Congress publication data, 1995. Anyway. There's 2 title pages. Yeah, it's just one of those skinny books. I guess it's intended for the bathroom or something, which is where I managed to read most of it. You know, I don't have much time to be doing any reading, really. I mean, except for contemporary magazines. I mean, in my studies, I don't get to read much books. Nixon is a purposeless man, but I have great faith in his cowardice, said Jimmy Breslin. I'm a fan of President Nixon. I worship the quicksand he walks on, said Art Buchwald. President Nixon's motto was, if 2 wrongs don't make a right, try 3. Murray Kempton said, he is the president of every place in this country which does not have a bookstore. The late Murray Kempton. John F. Kennedy said, do you realize the responsibility I carry? I am the only person standing between Nixon and the White House. RFK, who surely must have known, said, Richard Nixon represents the dark side of the American spirit. Henry Kay said, the essence of this man is loneliness. George McGovern said, I won't go so far as to say he's insane. I will go so far as to say I find his behavior peculiar. Well, yeah, talk about peculiar. I mean, appointing Tom Eagleton as your vice president and then dumping him. I mean, that was kind of peculiar, too. Gold in my ear. As President Nixon said, presidents can do almost anything, and President Nixon has done many things that nobody would have thought of doing. Tip O'Neill. I used to play poker with him, and any guy who could screech over losing $40 I always thought shouldn't be president of the United States. James Reston said, Richard Nixon inherited some good instincts from his Quaker forebears, but by diligent hard work he overcame them. Arthur Schlesinger Jr. said, one has the uneasy feeling that he is always on the verge of pronouncing himself the victim of some clandestine plot. And Adlai Stevenson said, he is the kind of politician who would cut down a redwood tree, then mount the stump and make a speech for conservation. Whoa. And finally, Harry Truman said about Richard Nixon, and I quote, a shifty-eyed goddamn liar, one of the few in the history of this country to run for high office, talking out of both sides of his mouth at the same time and lying out of both sides, says the cantankerous old Harry Truman. Was he cantankerous, or was he merely blunt and outspoken? They are frequently one and the same thing, you know. Anyway, now that nifty little digression has taken up otherwise valuable time, did you know that the 1962 New York Mets were the worst team in Major League history? Well, you know it now. Oh, Newt Gingrich. He survives a coup attempt because others are worse. This much is clear. No one likes him, says Newsweek. Dick Armey, smart move, betrays Newt and the anti-Newts in 1 week. No one likes him either. Now, we are talking, of course, mid-July, and it's already like late October here. And, you know, I really should be doing a Halloween show. Because, I mean, yeah, theme the thing around Halloween like The Simpsons are doing. See, now, what I'm hoping, ideally, now that I'm on my new Sunday slot, is that rather than watch the stupid, boring old movie of the week or the X-Files, seemingly pitched at morons, you would watch The Simpsons, King of the Hill, and then 2 hours of me. I mean, because I don't know what channel Fox is on up there. I guess it's 25. We'll go from 25 to channel 9, see? It's simple. 9 follows 25, because both represent the squares of prime numbers. Ha. So, you know, 9 is 3 squared, and 25 is 5 squared. So there's a certain eerie, and 64, see, that's also the square of a number, not a prime, but a whole number. If you can see a bandwagon, it's too late to get on it, says Sir James Goldschmidt. Words of wisdom. So you can see that the Wrong Hero bandwagon is slowly coalescing, so you had best get on it while you can, is my advice. It's like a circular firing squad, said Mark Foley on Delay, Army, Boner, Paxson, Newt, coup. Yeah, the whole thing that had the chattering classes in an uproar a good 3 months ago. I didn't do it, the system did it. There's nothing wrong with it because you already knew about it. This is President Clinton trying to wiggle out of some of his peccadillos that he's been accused of. I'm sorry. I'm still sleepy. I'm going to bed. I'm so tired. If you set out to kill the king, you better make sure he's dead, says James Carney, apropos the Newt coup. Boy, that was a real tempest in a teapot. Nothing's changed. One of Newt's slob associates is now in Coventry. Oh, here we go. The charming Roger Rosenblatt. The new rating systems. Women having a hard time, women having a very hard time, women having such a hard time that they set their husbands on fire, movies nobody's ever heard of, no longer funny, never funny, Ed McMahon, Alex Trebek. These are all ratings. AT equals Alex Trebek. Jeopardy is rated AT. Young people doing nothing, young people doing nothing on a beach, young people showing naked behinds and doing nothing on a beach, noisy people talking, boring people talking, dead people talking, movies that went directly from Final Cut to cable or pay-per-view without stopping at a theater, movies about sweating people in a Mississippi courtroom, you still have time to jump out the window, is he breathing, my head hurts so much I'm going to chop it off, perky people with teeth, makes you long for the OJ trial, you wish it were 24 hours, you wish it were 30 minutes, you wish it were 10:10. Watch out, here comes a lawyer. When people were trusted to figure things out for themselves. Anyway, this has nothing to do with politics per se. Well, at least you get to look at my facial expressions. Generally, when I'm on stage, the mask keeps you from being able to see the dull twinkle in my eyes. And every time it rains, pennies from heaven. And this nice thing about this is I can reach the controls, and I come to you to destroy your feeble planet. I shall destroy. Ah, there. See, I can't keep up the angry stuff on it for 2 hours. I mean, it's just too hard. So, whenever I decide to start ranting, I'll switch the polarity. The spirit at the core of extreme sports is one of escape from America's homogenizing corporate culture, an affirmation of the individual freedom and power to break your damn full neck, just like fireworks, except every year round. I added that last part, in case you haven't noticed. So that's why I'm writing it down. Yes, I'll get my book written yet. It's called The Wrong Hero Explains Everything and Nothing. Or, actually, I'm thinking of calling it, This Is Not a Book, Go On, Beat It, Scram, Get Out of Here, Fetch the Red Hot Branding Iron. Part 1. Oh, this is back when I read that long biography about Dean Martin. All right, we're going to get spontaneity if it takes all night. I read, in rapid succession, I read The King of Comedy, The Life and Art of Jerry Lewis, and the Dean Martin biography, Living High in the Dirty Business of Dreams. I guess this was just before I was taking a full course load in graduate school, and I still had time to do this. Hacks call every unhappy story a tragedy, says the witty Kurt Anderson concerning the Bill Cosby paternity suit. The Dow can get to 10,000 by 200, can get to 10,000 by the year 2000, then 15,000 by the year 2005 is likely, even though Alan Greenspan warns that the stock market is expanding too rapidly. Oh man, I just can't wait to see the faces of all those fat cats when the stock market goes bluey, as eventually it will. God, are they stupid? You ought to switch to diversified funds. Never bet money you can't afford to lose. The nation-state has now become too small for the big problems of life and too big for the small problems of life, says Daniel Bell, author of The Cultural Contradictions of Capitalism, and a pretty nice guy. Not that I've ever met him, but I'm sure he is. Sure he is. Oh, and getting back to King of the Hill, you notice how the archaeologist was portrayed as a sniveling milksop. That's nice. It's nice that there's no respect whatsoever or any, it's like down in Texas, oh, you're a professor, huh? Well, that might impress my wife, but it don't impress me. Richard Daley, the toughest gun in the street, said Paul Green. See how disconnected this is? Isn't it disorienting? But that's because, it's like July, August. That's the season when nothing really happens in politics. And what little does happen is seized upon with the voracious avidity of locusts encircling a newly harvested crop. Well, anyway, I keep insisting that nothing's going on, but every once in a while, some little nuggets, like campaigns and elections. Can you imagine the August 1997 issue of Campaigns and Elections? It must be the thinnest magazine in the world. Stay focused, work hard, always be fair, and never give up. That is the maxim that Robin Roberts. There's two chances in 7 that Republicans will keep the Senate, says Ron Fachot. After months of campaigning, voters were like Jell-O. They'd wobble in different directions and return to their basic shapes. Concerning the Maloney-Franks race of 1996. Politicians are a lot like dogs. They're always begging, they both love to shake your hand, and the minute you turn your back, they're on your wife's leg. The cure for admiring the House of Lords is to go and look at it, says Walter Badgehoe. Anyone who deliberately tries to get himself elected to public office is permanently disqualified from holding one, says Thomas More. Isn't it harder in politics to defeat a fool than an abler man, says Thomas E. Dewey, who presumably puts himself in the second rank. Well, anyway, Salman Rushdie, J.D. Salinger, Liz Taylor, Frank Sinatra, and 26 other people have signatures with an immediate value of $100 or more. And these are living people, mind you. I guess because J.D. Salinger doesn't give out many signatures these days. And Frank Sinatra would probably not be very happy. And his bodyguards would be even less happy if you were to ask him for his signature. And Liz Taylor, she'd insist that you give her the $100 so she could donate it to her favorite charity. Salman Rushdie, well, if you could find him, I'm sure he'd be happy to give you a signature. This isn't a trick, is it? It's not a trap, is it? Oh, yeah, I thought I'd show you. Here's a picture of the wrong hero in his civilian identity on vacation. Let me see if I can't position this in such a way that will enable you to see it. It's going to be hard, but how's that? This will be the new logo for my program. That's my pal, Mr. Peanut. As you can see, we're having a lot of fun hamming it up for the camera. And it's amazing how good a picture you can get out of this camera. Let us focus on that somewhat good-looking young man to the right of Mr. Peanut. Notice that the lumpy physiognomy almost perfectly replicates the smooth and yet somehow also lumpy physiognomy of Mr. Peanut. Maybe I should just run that picture for the next hour and a half or so. You know, it's funny that Jerry Lewis should have such a big success with Hell's a Poppin', because I recall that when the thing first came out, it was called Hell's a Floppin'. Yeah, I think I will do this for the next 10 minutes or so, just to give myself something of a break, so I don't have to like sit there. You know, the lights are kind of sweaty and stuff. So I'm an alcoholic. I'm a drug addict. I'm a homosexual. I'm a genius, said Truman Capote. All right, actually, I'll let this be the sort of background picture. So every time I have to get up, at least you'll have something to look at. There. I don't know if staring at my screaming face is any more edifying than looking at that picture, to tell you the truth, or just looking at scenery. Notice how the red light of the video camera glints off of the spectacle of my glasses. That gleam in my eye. This is about as low-tech a production as you could possibly get, right? I mean, if there was a plug, I would probably plug the camera in a little further away so you wouldn't have this extreme close-up view. And if there was a better source of light, then surely I'd be able to conduct this at a somewhat less of an inconveniencing close-up distance. But anyway, sorry about that. Sorry, folks. It's 12:07. I've got about an hour more of this program to do. By the time I finish, it'll be probably about 1:15 or so. I'll have 45 minutes to try to set the printer up on the computer that we just got, and then I got to take a shower. Oh, but before that, I'll have to take the dog home. Maybe I'll do that after I finish this and before I try to fiddle around with the computer. Bill Clinton, Identity Economics, according to the Weekly Standard. That's what Bill Clinton indulges in. Identity economics. It's going to be a long, hot summer. I don't have to tell you who gets hurt when this sort of thing happens, do I? Your people do. Your people do, said Perot to the NAACP. When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, cited by Chris Caldwell, somebody who I knew in college and didn't very much like and still don't like, incidentally. Dilbert Abul Fadfink. I don't quite understand that citation. Newt appears beyond salvage. In 1995, in his messianic way, convinced he might govern America from the House of Representatives like Henry Clay in 1812. We want to improve conditions in depressed urban areas, so we show our good intentions by sprinkling a handful of federal fairy dust over them, says Louis Maynol in the New York Review of Books from August 14th. Now, how did I get a hold of the New York Review of Books from August 14th before it was even August? That's a good question. Well, maybe I got this. Oh, it's the New York Review of Books, not the New York Times Book Review. That's why. The country is in love with gestures. Again, quoting Louis Maynol. A culture, after all, is made up of symbols. Giving you time to digest that while I readjust the camera. For example, the symbol of the wrong hero. and Americans tend to regard them very reverently. This is a country that has devoted a good deal of its creative energy to producing innovations in the art of the handshake. Clinton succeeded in 1992 and 1996 by blunting the strengths and exploiting the weaknesses of the people he had to beat, and more importantly, by responding to the diffuse, almost subpolitical mood that was out there in the country. He defeated Bush not because the economy was sagging, but because he made a sagging economy the issue. And he defeated Dole by the same strategy, by making Dole seem fuddled and inept. Clinton ran a stupefyingly empty campaign against Dole because the more vacuous he sounded, the more Dole looked like a man swinging wildly at the moon. Dole ended up, in effect, knocking himself out. Wow, the post-mortem of the election. Clinton's style, a weird combination of compassion, self-centeredness, uplift, and indecisiveness, is a style that seems to suit a politically fractured, intellectually uninspired time. Hey, this is some pretty good shit here, man. And all quotations from Louis Menon in the New York Review of Books from the 14th of August. The political mood in the country is schizophrenic, a fickle combination of meism and do-goodism, and Clinton is its representative. Democrats failing to win the House due to the yak factor after Huang was not entirely displeasing to Al Gore, since it prevented Gephardt from becoming Speaker. Gore encouraged Clinton to continue to try to roll up his own numbers in the final weeks rather than stump for Democratic congressional candidates in states in which he was already comfortably ahead. Possibly one of the lessons of Clinton's success, or one of the consequences of Clintonism, is that something like a base, some core constituency unshakably united on ideals and principles, no longer exists in the Democratic Party. The reason the money is so important is the terror of honest political speech, said Michael Lewis. The previous quote was cited by Elizabeth Drew, or was cited by Louis Menon from Elizabeth Drew. Presidential politics is now mainly the art of risk avoidance, and this is why the 1996 campaign was so devoid of ideas and debate. Democratic politics depends on direct confrontation and commitment to ideas. It is admirable only when it requires nerve. And, indeed, so much for that. A whole bunch of stuff about Jerry Seinfeld. And now, the American Prospect, in its editorial for September-October 1997. We ought to think of work not just as a disutility, but as an organizing moral principle that helps us make sense of our lives. Okay. Right. Washington has a curious intellectual dynamic. The less understood an idea is, the faster it spreads. China can still cause enormous military problems in Asia, but that doesn't call for the kind of containment strategy the United States had adopted toward the Soviet Union. Well, because China is not quite as in the middle of things as Russia. For one, instead it requires a regional strategy, a United States naval presence, Japan in a more active military role, and positive incentives. Well. Now, this was funny, because I was doing a little bit of reference librarianship over the weekend down at the Kennedy School about a week ago, sometime in early to mid-October. And someone was asking about whether there were any books on East St. Louis. And lo and behold, here is a reference to East St. Louis, Illinois. 40,000 residents, 98% black, half qualify for public assistance, 44% live below the poverty line. Per capita income, $6,400. The worst in the state. I can't imagine trying to live on $6,400. I mean, at one time I was capable of doing it, but that was 10 years ago. I suppose, let's see. Let's say I was incredibly lucky and somehow got a place for $200 a month. I could just about squeak by. Otherwise, though,
751-6715. Please leave a message after the beep.
it would be nearly impossible. She's listening to her messages.
Hello, this message is for Francis. This is Manny calling to let you know that the cabaret has been killed. It's all over. There's going to be one final cabaret in November, first Saturday of the month. To come in and...
Hello? Oh, God. Who says this? Oh, yeah, what's going to replace it? I have no idea. Did they say why? Not working anymore. Is Algernon going to be there? Who all is going to be there? That's too bad. You think they'd wait until December. But they usually skip it in December anyway, so. Alright, well, that's nice. I guess I'll have to think of something else. I'll have to do Pork Chop Lounge more often than I have been. Not since May of last year I've like that, but, you know, I'll get back into it. What was it like when you did it last night? Yeah? Cool. Was there a theme? Was there... Okay. Sounds good. Well, that might be the way to go. And if they have it every week or just... Yeah. Well, yep, I guess that's going to be the way for me to go. Oh, yeah. Pretty sure. I think I'll smash every record I haven't smashed yet. That'll be fun. Cool. I'll have to get all my chums to show up to this one. All the people who said they wanted to see me and have never gotten around to doing it, I'll have to insist. We shouldn't even charge admission, but I imagine we will. I think so. But, well, it's going to be pretty, it'll probably be pretty crowded, won't it? Yeah. Someone ought to, like, notify the press. I don't know if that should be me. sooner you get in touch with the Phoenix, the better, because I think they have like a 10 or 11 day lead time. Yeah. What you'll probably end up doing is they'll tell you to write it, you know, to put it in writing and send it to them. And yeah, you could do that. I don't think you'd object to that. All right, great. Thanks for letting me know. Appreciate it. All right. Well, that's it. That's the end of my regular guaranteed gigs, and for 1997. I've been in this business for 12 years, and I finally reached the end of my rope in virtually every respect. Well, I can do the pork chop lounge, but it's like sort of like show up and, you know, do it as you know, pay as you go. I mean, I could do a show every week. 5 minutes every week, that would be easy. But that would be overexposure. God, now I gotta start doing the fucking pork chop lounge instead of having my own show. The very last cabaret of the Oddly Normal will be on November 1st in Providence, Rhode Island's AS220 at 115 Empire Street at 9:10 p.m. It's a Saturday, and the Cabaret of the Oddly Normal has been going on for, I don't know, at least as long as, it was once a month for like the last 7 years or more. I mean, actually, it's been going on, it's been an ongoing thing since AS220 started back in like 1986 or something like that. It's a real shame they're getting rid of it, but hey, what can you do? It's too bad. I guess it's just about, you know, it's had its run. Now it's going to probably be replaced by some god-awful poetry thing or something. One discerns in the conservative stance a more punitive sensibility that holds that poor people should work, not to be free, but to learn the importance of obedience, respect for discipline, says Alan Wolf. It's not like we were even getting paid for this Cabaret of the Oddly Normal thing. Here we go. Our old pal Daniel Bell. Capitalism, Daniel Bell wrote in The Cultural Contradictions of Capitalism, finds itself increasingly divided between the discipline required by its productive side and the hedonism encouraged by its consumptive side. Against the utopianism of the New Left, the Protestant ethic did not seem like such a bad thing, a moral obligation that projects religious behavior onto the everyday world. This doesn't make any sense to me. I can't concentrate now. Well, whoever it was, they decided not to leave a message. That's a real headache. Anyway, what time is it? Geez, it's 12:24. Capitalism finds itself increasingly divided between the discipline required by its productive side and the hedonism encouraged by its consumptive side. Against the utopianism of the New Left, the Protestant ethic did not seem like such a bad thing, a moral obligation that projects religious behavior onto the everyday world, said Weber. But even at the height of the first capitalist revolution, in the Dutch Republic, opulence was never far from the consciousness of the bourgeoisie, said Schlama. Geez, I don't know. Does that make any sense at all? Let's go on. Bell points to the attraction of intellectuals to postmodernism as evidence for how adversarial to productivist values the oppositional culture of bourgeois society has become. In such a society, not only is it hard to find moral reasoning in work, it is hard to find moral meaning in anything. Moral meaning in work, moral meaning in anything. God, am I upset. They're getting rid of my one guaranteed gig. this is really the end of an era for the wrong hero. I knew it was coming all along. The show was really starting to bite. Human beings are moral creatures in the sense that they do not merely act, but also give accounts for their actions. People do not work only to make money, Withnow argues, but also to give a legitimate account of themselves. The problem is that market societies do not reliably provide enough jobs that nourish our higher aspirations, says Robert Lane in The Market Experience. Many Americans treat the workplace as the arena in which they make friends, learn about themselves, and meet challenges, while, at least for some Americans, the family has become the location for conflict, emotional complications, and unsolvable problems. A workaholic culture that stands both men and women, that strands both men and women outside the home. Whatever a person's social class, outlook on the world, or motivations, work can be an essential component of personal development. Welfare capitalism, according to Kodak and Sears, was seen by its enthusiasts as an attempt to develop an industrial community, a Gemeinschaft that would be an alternative to tailorized bureaucracy and to market contractualism. Welfare capitalism was obviously instituted to head off the formation of independent labor unions. Its underlying assumptions were feudalistic in nature. In many high-tech firms, a moral hierarchy is emerging. Workers who use their minds are being treated by employers as fiscal and moral partners in the enterprise, while those who use their hands are treated as disposable human commodities. Sort of like we are with the Cabaret of the Oddly Normal. Disposable human commodities. Well, let's see, what have we here? Might magazine, as cited in the New Republic of August 4th, launched slingshot fusillades at the information elite, such as the following, which appeared on the largely fictional contents page in 1995. How to absolutely and completely bastardize and emasculate a perfectly good magazine by pretending that imbecilic stargazing celebrity journalism isn't imbecilic stargazing celebrity journalism if it's written by people like Martin Amis by Tina Brown. A riveting article about John Travolta by the inimitable Martin Amis, with some help here and there from the good humble folks at Entertainment Weekly. Page 80. Can You Be a Feminist and Love Men Too? By Naomi Wolf. Page 82. Can you be a provocative thinker and a good journalist and still pimp your work out to drivel like Cosmopolitan? Also by Naomi Wolf. Harumph, Harumph, Harumph by William Safire. Same Old Shit by Bob Greene. How My Lovely Daughter's Smile Gives Me New Insights About the World's Injustices by Anna Quindlen. Politics, Entertainment, Can't Tell the Difference by Frank Rich. I'm still upset. My emotions are churning. Strive. You ever heard about this? Hey, you ever heard about this? Strive. It's this job placement program. It means teaching them that all their affectations and the artifacts of style they have adopted to mark themselves as special are worth nothing. Paper armor. The program, by the very fact of its toughness, rejects the sure losers early on. It doesn't matter if you can do the job if you don't fit in. Wake up, we're fighting a battle here. They are interested in the self you can be made to become, or at least to appear, tearing the focus of pride away from one narrow identity and moving it to a more universal one, says Hannah Rosen. What you should be proud of is your public role, the face you put up to the world, even if it's an innocent deception. The person who runs the Strive program in one area is more concerned with what you look like than what you are like, perhaps because he knows like that, to a real degree, the former dictates the latter. I understand, but I got no understanding, trainer Sykes likes to say. Sykes knows all the excuses before you even say them. My boss is a racist. He's still a racist, and you're out of a job. Who wins? I have no money for the bus. But you got money to buy weed and meet your boys downtown. I'm on welfare. I don't need to work. And you slip off all your gold rings and jewelry in the parking lot before you go to the welfare office. I'll stick my neck out for anyone as long as they help themselves. But if they give me that "you supposed to help me" look, I won't even look at them, says Sykes. The rhetoric is we're really going to eliminate dependency, but it's not going to happen for the most disadvantaged, says Rebecca Blank, cited by Dana Milbank. This is like the work, the summer of work. That's what I calls it. Lolling about the academic deep think tank, trading mantras like, this is about television, frame analysis, Irvin Goffman, fake realism, T.W. Adorno, processed culture, Richard Hoggart, waning of affect, Frederick Jameson, social facsimile, Kenneth Gergen, violence profiles, George Gerbner, iconography of rooms, Horace Newcomb, narcoleptic joy, Michael Sorkin, glass tit, Harlan Ellison, thalidomide, Robert Bly, masturbation, Michael Arlen, Alan Bloom, David Mamet. Down among the Mad Hatters of critical theory, you'd think the Looking Glass were somehow entropic, a heat death of the culture. What all this television has in common is narrative. Even network news is in the storytelling business. Krista Wolf. Only the advent of property, hierarchy, and patriarchy extracts a blood-red thread from the fabric of human life. And this thread is amplified at the expense of the web as a whole, at the expense of its uniformity. The blood-red thread is the narrative and struggle and victory of the heroes or their doom. The plot is born. Or as Don DeLillo put it, there is a tendency of plots to move toward death. The idea of death is woven into the nature of every plot, a narrative plot no less than a conspiracy of armed men. The tighter the plot of the story, the more likely it will come to death. Cheerful fellow. Well, there's just so much matter in this book. Smoke and Mirrors. You know, you really ought to read it. It is a fine book. Smoke and Mirrors. Television, violence, television, and other American cultures. And a good deal of this stuff would be quite applicable to this presentation, but I think instead of me reading it to you, you ought to read it for yourself, because I'm tired and I'm very distressed. I just had my last refuge of performance art pulled out from under me. Now, anytime I do a show, it's not a scheduled program. It will have to be done as a conscious decision by me to actually go out and solicit a program. I no longer have my guaranteed slot. Or as Billy Crystal was heard to moan in the book, in the movie Mr. Saturday Night, I lost my winters. I just lost my winters again. I keep losing my winters. This happened in 1994 when I lost my contract at the Middle East and was reduced to one show a month at the Cabaret of the Oddly Normal. Now, 3 years later, I lost my once-a-month show at the Cabaret of the Oddly Normal. Now I'm reduced to doing 5-minute sets at a weekly show that I have to book ahead of time. No, sir, I am not a happy camper. This was before I knew that my show was going to be shit canned. See how happy I was? Me and my little buddy, Mr. Peanut. Well, nothing to be done. Oh, what the hell. I think I will do some of the television stuff because, well, it's extremely apropos to the way I'm feeling right now. So, of course, my feelings shouldn't have anything to do with it. I mean, it should just be, whether or not I am committed to entertaining you or not. But I am going to take about 10 minutes to go through this fascinating book called, this unforgettable book called, this book, it took me like a whole day to do this work. It's called Smoke and Mirrors, Violence, Television, and Other American Cultures by John Leonard. I quote from page 19. Excuse me. A door closing, heard over the air, a face contorted, seen in a panel of light. These will emerge as the real and true. And when we bang the door of our own cell or look into another space, the impression will be of mere artifice, says E.B. White. The rules for the gossip column were: lead with your scoop, speed it up, an item for everybody. The rules for the Ed Sullivan Show on CBS would become: open big, keep it clean, stick in something the kids will like. Doc Hashaloo's Elixir of Life, Dr. Reitman's Sovereign Balm of Life, Dr. Raphael's Cordial Invigorant, Dr. Chase's Nerve Pills, Ho Ang Man's Great Chinese Herb Remedy, Bumstead's Worm Syrup, Blood Purifier, Cholera Balm, Oriental Liniment, Omni Balsamic Reinvigorator, Samaritan Pain Dissuader, Church's Kava Kava Compound Kidney Cure. All the names of patent medicines. Celebrity is what a democratic society has instead of aristocrats. Comedy appears to have disintegrated, like Yugoslavia. Like pop music, it lost the easy assumptions and lazy stereotypes that pass for coherence. Lily Tomlin. I worry that drugs have forced us to be more creative than we really are. Toothless sitcoms through which our erstwhile outrageous stand-up comics grin, defanged and venom challenged. We know they're working class because they go bowling. Sitcom writers turn everything, even censorship, into wisecracks. That's what they get those big bucks for, and why Chekhov doesn't. These many stories of joblessness and paranoia, smashed cars and nights in jail, wife beating, child abuse, loony bins, AIDS, hallucination, and attempted suicide, disconnection and the end of love, were really one about a lost child in a black forest of bad chemicals. Existentialism, according to which we choose now and we choose new and feistier selves by thinking against our family origins and class interests, by acting as if we were free, is reserved for commercials. The TV experience, however, is more ambiguous, complicated by the pathos and skepticism we bring to our watching and personal neediness at the smorgasbord and trough, a face-off of competing gestalts. Or as Lillian Hellman put it, God help all the children as they move into a time of life they do not understand and must struggle through with precepts they have picked up from the garbage can of other people, clinging with the passion of the lost to odds and ends that will mess them up for all time, or hating the trash so much they will waste their future on hatred. Amazing that sensitivity to other people's pain should somehow turn into a whole new rhetoric of ridicule, as if empathy and old-fashioned knee-jerk liberalism were any threat to the paychecks, perks, and power games of a muscular patriarchy. As if feeling bad on behalf of the aggrieved were simultaneously lily-livered and totalitarian, or even worse, unhip, less than way cool. Held too tight, children crack. You don't have to be a postmodern to recognize in such a literature of disenchantment and subversive subjectivity some of the kinky stuff Foucault was onto, with inscripted bodies and disciplinary technologies and transgressive subtexts. The Lost Child is both a product of the culture and a magic slate on which we scrawl ourselves. When the axe came into the forest, the tree said, "The handle is one of us," says Alice Walker. Incapable of sustained attention, assertive memory, logical inference, or that range of consciousness which groups many incidents into a harmonious whole, they abhor the drama and adore burlesque for its very fault's sake. This was said by The Atlantic in 1909. Just as a donkey with a hard mouth can only be guided by violent jerks upon the reins, so a dull literary sensibility can only be awakened by the harshest literary appeal, as quoted in the North American Review of 1913. Pure trash, pure vulgarity, if you will, but pure. Here are stories that are all plot, snap, ginger, and wish fulfillment. Cheap fairy tales of business and adventure, turned out as if by machinery. The product, though multitudinous, is uniform, and one can buy one's magazine by the color of the eyes of the girl on the cover. Here is illustration that carries rubber stamp beauty and heroism, according to Seven Arts magazine in 1916. Plutocratic feudal America, made up of cockney, white-collar slaves, sordid, golf-playing, spruce overseers, and the masters, speak through this school. The writers are amazingly expert technicians who perform a definite function in the industrial dynasty. They feed the masses the opium of cheap romanticism and turn their thoughts from the concrete to the impossible. They gild the filth in which we live. They make heroes out of slave drivers and saints out of vultures. But they cannot create great art, said Mike Gold in The Liberator in 1921. Just as a banknote is only a slip of paper, so the member of society is a sort of fiduciary money made out of living flesh. This combination is extremely favorable to the designs of a subtle novelist, said Paul Valery, speaking on Proust. I think I have enough trouble as it is trying to say what I know, says Samuel Beckett. Do you believe in the life to come? Mine was always that, says Samuel Beckett. Upward corporate mobility as a form of symbolic patricide, cited on page 105 of the book Smoke and Mirrors by John Leonard. Now, Oprah's book club, this ain't. I deliberately only picked the most difficult, thorny, and naughty texts which will take you an enormous amount of time to wade through completely, as opposed to the kind of lightweight read in a single afternoon and forget 1 hour later type reading as promoted on Oprah's program. In that way, the wrong hero is in fact wrong in everything he says and does. populace may hiss me, but when I go home and think of my money, I applaud myself, said Horace in the year 25 BC. Hence the expression, laughing all the way to the bank. Television, like the low culture for which it is a machine intelligence, specializes in the politics of resentment. Populist and punchy, deep down in its seething unconscious, it is suspicious of institutions, leery of technology, offended by discipline, relishing flashpoints and the quick fix, yet underdogged and little-gazed, loving mainly loners and losers. And little guys, sorry. I thought I understood the Victorian revival, but could we possibly be nostalgic for Regency England, for arranged marriage and primogeniture? A century later, Kafka looked into his mirror, and what he saw was the modern corporation. He also invented workmen's compensation. To programs, you bring your own monocle and morbidity. You cut or paste, underline or italicize, delete or dump a day's worth of brave deeds and shameful secrets, a lifetime's compost of compunctions and regrets. These condition how we see what we see, and that's how we are, wrote Pablo Neruda, forever falling into the deep well of other beings. Or as James Garner puts it, life's a knife. Sooner or later a man slips and gets cut. Mockery is the last refuge of a bankrupt genre. Self-loathing is another way for one exhausted genre, for an exhausted genre to go. The best science fiction is either about strangeness or its subversive social criticism. If you can't fuck it and it doesn't dance, eat it or throw it away, says Cadogan. We rely on science fiction to extrapolate from the personal anxiety of noir to the generalized paranoia of dark satanic forces and species-devouring systems. Democracy is as much a language as it is a place. If a man has suffered under a society of privilege, the American vernacular can serve him as a kind of passport to freedom and equality. Mortal man is a broomstick which raiseth the mighty dust where there was none before, sharing deeply all the while in the very same pollution he pretends to sweep away, said Jonathan Swift. January 1981. Down and dirty Hill Street Blues, handheld Wamball with the Opal's Mitsuguchi camera constantly in motion, the Robert Altman tracking shots and overlapping dialogue, the John Dos Passos entanglement of out-of-sequence storylines and subplots, the step frame process, the grainy and laminated look, and cops who die even though we care about them. All momentum. Indeed. TV can't get by for long without some sort of therapeutic ethos. It is not only the flip side of commercial salesmanship, but also one of the strongest currents in the narrative stream. Writers have access to grind. We watch more than one program in its many frames of mind, at least as conflicted as the characters we taste test. Fascism and modernism are co-joined. They correspond. They are letters from some camp, from the same camp, with its weak male ego boundaries and chimney smoke of human cinder. Our culture, right or wrong. From the street, the mainstream always looks soft and faithless, rounding off distinctive edges, living the life you can't see yourself in their cartoons. But that's what TV does to everything. Softens, rounds, flattens, inflates, and approximates. From such a stereo, we get mostly types. What we wish for in a popular culture is a plenitude of them, sufficiently diversified to let us intuit from these scattered signs the existence of some complicated truth. American TV since the 1980s, on American TV since the 1980s, a woman older than Lolita who smokes instead of jogging is automatically either a bad person or else working class, probably bowls and is dumb. Men have always been willing to sacrifice domestic relationships for the higher calling of some exact science. Shut up, we explain to the children. I'm building a bomb to save the world. In 1953, Eisenhower took Earl Warren aside, and this is what Ike said about the South. These aren't bad people. All they're concerned about is to see that their sweet little girls aren't required to sit in school alongside some big overgrown Negroes. Albert Camus, working definition of an intellectual, someone whose mind watches itself. James Earl Jones in his Bach B minor of a voice. The gloved one rock concerts like Nuremberg pep rallies, pandering to the polymorphous perversity of the prepubescent. I am not interested in indulging myself in some private, closed exercise of my imagination that fulfills only the obligations of my personal dreams. It seems to me that the best art is unquestionably political and irrevocably beautiful at the same time, says Toni Morrison. Or as a French waitress once said to a.j. Liebling, a chagrin of love never forgets itself. You must not make bile about it. George W.S. Trow, in his highly prophetic book, In the Context of No Context, published, I believe, in 1979, said, the work of TV is to establish false contexts and to chronicle the unraveling of existing contexts, finally, to establish the context of no context and to chronicle it. The lie of television is that there are contexts to which television will grant an access. Since lies last usually no more than one generation, TV will reform around the idea that television itself is a context to which television will grant an access. As David Lynch says, I don't know why people expect art to make sense. They accept the fact that life doesn't make sense. Twin Peaks. Imagine Norman Mailer's An American Dream serialized by TV instead of Esquire. Or Mary Hartman with a teleplay by Celine. Or Dark Shadows meets Mayberry RFD. Or Falcon Crest meets Naked Lunch. But also Brechtian, sort of, or maybe no. It's like sex and it takes time, says David Lynch about Twin Peaks. We used to be able to count on magazines like Time as early warning signal systems or radar lookout with their sarcastic pop guns for the menacing blip of avant-garde or anything else alarming to the bourgeoisie. The media today are not to be distinguished from the engines of publicity at RoboCorp and the ad agencies they hire to fog us, and the departments of popular culture at our major universities with a heavy investment in the attention deficit disorders of the American postdoctorate, and the rest of what Valerie once called the delirious professions. All those trades whose main tool is one's opinion of oneself, and whose raw material is the opinion others have of you. As Don DeLillo said in White Noise, cited in this book, Smoke and Mirrors, Violence, Television, and Other American Cultures, root out content. Find the codes and messages. TV offers incredible amounts of psychic data. It opens ancient memories of world birth. It welcomes us into the grid, the network of little buzzing dots that make up the picture pattern. There is light, there is sound. I ask my students, what more do you want? Look at the wealth of data concealed in the grid, in the bright packaging, the jingles, the slice-of-life commercials, the products hurtling out of the darkness, the coded messages in endless repetitions, like chants, like mantras. Coke is it, Coke is it. The medium practically overflows with sacred formulas. There are those actors so swallowed up by a single TV role that they lose their own identity and end up weirdly iconographic, part of the culture's shorthand, as vivid as characters from Dickens, corporate logos, dollar signs, or swastikas. Rockford, Columbo, Kojak, Beaver, Fonzie, Hawkeye, Archie Bunker, Ted Baxter, Ralph Cramden, J.R., Mary Richards, Anne Murphy Brown, a Partridge Family, Brady Bunch. Combine busy serfdom with prior network commitments to a handful of bankable stars, and what you get is cronyism, mutual back-scratching, behind-the-scenes favors, revolving doors, musical chairs, careers made by following upwards, the amazing largesse given to favored members of the creative community. The same names stay in circulation for years or decades, sometimes because a rare competency will out, but more often because beneath the hell-bent pursuit of the fugitive audience and the smooth logic of taking the fewest risks, old boy networks bind this savage business together against its own ignorance and against its centrifugal whirl, said Todd Gitlin. Television executives who cancel the show because there is always a worse one awaiting, who censor the script as if they could write a memo without a secretary, and who barter and browbeat the talent as if they had some. The empty suits and psychic yard goods salesmen and the shape-shifting, backstabbing sycophants who fetch for them, fearful they will be found out for faking competence and fudging issues and pretending they have interior lives to console them for their many crimes against intelligence and decency, that they'll be jettisoned from the mothership with nothing to market but their stress-related opinion of themselves. Our big brain didn't just develop so we'd feel bad on realizing we had to die, but our thinking about death shapes much of what we make of our lives. The sniper sights of the feral comedians, such sad clowns, those Lettermans and Lenos. Like birthday balloons, they hang in the air, waiting for children to stone them. Dave seems gnawed by self-doubts ever since his Oscar night fiasco. That's the bitch about being so postmodern, so self-referential, so mediated and ironized, that whatever you say or think comes pre-equipped with quotation marks and asterisks. You are suspicious of your own texts, such on elsewhere impossibly heterogeneous, a riot of subjectivities, everything seen at once from everyone's point of view, fractured, fleeting, violent, disposable, fugitive, totalizing, glossy, and parodic. I refuse to be intimidated by reality anymore, says Lily Tomlin. What is reality but a collective hunch? A definition of kitsch, a term for art of little value, an art that is meretricious, a misleading, ingratiating semblance of the real thing. Ordinary kitsch covers over reality with the appearance of it. It appeals to the desire for the pleasant and harmonious. But there is also a kitsch of death, an aestheticizing of experience, says Eugene Goodhart. According to Eduardo Galino, there is a division of labor in the ranks of the powerful. The army, paramilitary organizations, and hired assassins concern themselves with social contradictions and the class struggle. Civilians are responsible for speeches. Naturally, the best and the brightest end up in New York. Network news divisions differ from major player law firms or investment houses only in particulars of routine. Every guild or chivalric order needs its tragic hero. The role requires courage and style, valor and grace. But there should also be a wound, a shadow on the splendor. Something self-destructive as well as emblematic. Edward Murrow was that kind of hero for broadcast journalists. He watched helplessly as TV pawned its power to modify the way the nation thinks about itself to the ad agencies. To be a hero, wrote Simone Weil, one must give an order to oneself. That's not where the orders come from these days. Instead of courage, we've got demographics. Slap Maxwell. Some of the wackiest one-liners in the annals of sitcom. Tears are for ballerinas. As serious as beavers in a pantry. Love doesn't make the buttercups shine. Gone like meat on the side of a boat. Dead as a walnut. Network news producers begin each working day with a careful reading of the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. But so do Time and Newsweek, The Nation, The New Republic, National Review, The Weekly Standard, with a skepticism hard to distinguish from paranoia. The New York Times and the Washington Post are also constantly monitoring CNN. George Magazine, as if we weren't already afflicted with the New Yorker gone Hollywood and a Vanity Fair that psychobabbled postures in front of experience rather than engaging it, looks in its cynical opportunism for an angle, not principle, strikes attitudes like matches the better to admire its own inside wise guy profile. In the final analysis, it doesn't bother anyone very much that politics be democratic, so long as the economy is not, says Eduardo Galeano. Before we blame, we should first see if we can excuse, says G.C. Lichtenberg. In a modern age when information is a commodity for sale, only the deepest of pockets will end up owning it unless we learn to roll with the spin and duck the sucker punch. Greed modifies behavior more than television does. Six stallions say, I can afford. Is not their strength my property? I tear along a sporting lord, as if their legs belonged to me, says Goethe in Faust. Such works are like mirrors. If an ape peers into it, no apostle will look out, says G.C. Lichtenberg. Truly great art is where we go alone to complicate ourselves. Inside its solitude, we take on contours, textures, and perspectives, and are transfigured. You can't ordain great art. It waits in ambush. Since money, as the existing and active concept of value, confounds and exchanges everything, it is the universal confusion and transposition of all things, the inverted world, the confusion and transposition of all natural and human qualities. In other words, according to Karl Marx, like a soundbite and maybe even an apocalyptic trope, if money is the only way we keep score, every other human relation is corrupted. And that seems to be about as good a way to end lip service as any. However, we still have 10 minutes to go, and so maybe I will use this opportunity to wrap up the program. This took a lot longer than I thought it would. It took up a whole 30 minutes. Well, you know, it took me several hours to read, and I'm sure it took the person who wrote it close to 5 years to compile. And so, half an hour to distill its essence for your benefit is little enough to ask. Of course, whether you were able to follow that rather disjointed presentation. See, my heart's not in this. I'm rather distressed about the career development which has just revealed itself unto me. Anyway, back to politics. In the Progressive for August of 1997, Kurt Volkmar says, the tacit acceptance of outdated parameters and measurements of economic activity plays directly into the hands of the upholders of the status quo. Well, duh. Also in the Progressive, quoted by Christian Melgard, we are gradually giving public broadcasting back to the private sector through our neglect. Yeah, and just look at what public broadcasting brings you. Things like The Wrong Hero. In what other civilized country could you watch somebody just sit here for 2 hours with his enormous looming face taking up the screen? The warm climate community just hasn't found a colder climate that is attractive, said Representative Helen Chenoweth, Republican of Idaho. She's referring to black people, incidentally. Asian students were beaten at a Denny's in Syracuse, New York, by the way. There's nothing the Republicans hate more than negotiating with Clinton. It's like trying to throttle a shadow, says Will Durst. The CIA's 40-year complicity in the narcotics trade, said, is cited by Alfred McCoy. You're not supposed to, have heard that. I didn't say that. Okay? So, NATO is the Yalta Agreement in reverse, according to the Washington Press Review. Now, what have we here? The book Virtuous Reality, subtitled How Americans Surrendered Discussion of Moral Values to Opportunists, Nitwits, and Blockheads like William Bennett, by John Katz. Page 6. Modern media executives have only refined the lessons learned by mid-19th century publishers. The blander you are, the more people you can reach, the more advertisers you can attract. To be outspoken is to offend. To offend is to alienate consumers. To alienate consumers is to earn less money. As an inevitable consequence of the mass marketing its practitioners are now forced to practice, journalism has become militantly moderate on most issues, struggling to offend the fewest. It has become exclusive, relegating most individuals to the role of passive consumers. It has ghettoized commentary, restricting opinion to editorial and op-ed pages. Journalism seems less concerned about provoking the powerful than about snuggling up to political insiders, raking in fat speaking fees and book advances, getting into the hot parties. It has wreaked havoc upon national politics, subjecting candidates and office holders to unending inquisitions about their personal lives. It is addicted to controversy, ceaselessly relaying arguments rather than helping us resolve problems. In shame-free America, extreme failure in the pursuit of self-righteousness is no vice. In fact, it is a marketing opportunity. Far from brooding quietly over the untamed drug epidemic or failing schools, William Bennett has taught us a thing or two about gall and redemption, inspiring everyone who blunders spectacularly and wonders if there is life beyond. Americans would rather denounce representatives of violence than attack the real thing. Modern media have no ideology. Almost everything they do is rooted in marketing and economics. Newspapers and TV stations rarely focus on inner city issues and problems simply because there's no money in it. How could we possibly reach anything like consensus when our primary information media don't permit their own reporters to reach conclusions, only to quote from spokespeople whose livelihood literally depends on never changing their minds? The wretch who will write on any subject for bread or in any service for pay stands equally in rank with the prostitute who lets out her person, according to Thomas Paine. Revolutionaries need to die young or turn conservative in order not to lose favor with society, says Tommy Thompson. Brute facts for modern anthropologists to confront: the changing social, territorial, and cultural reproduction of group identity. As groups migrate, regroup in new locations, reconstruct their histories, and reconfigure their ethnic projects or goals, the landscapes of group identity all over the world are changing. Appadurai calls these new communities ethnoscapes. One important source of this change is the mass media. Mobility, diversity, and media exposure alter groups' expectations, generate instability, cement differences, exacerbate conflict. Historically impoverished or oppressed people no longer see their lives as mere outcomes of the givenness of things. Instead of accepting their fates, they retain their own values and reject many of those imposed by the cultures they find themselves in. All over the planet, definitions of what nations are and mean are changing. We live in a world of crisscrossed economies, intersecting systems of meaning, and fragmented identities, says Roger Rouse. We have moved, he cautions, into a new kind of social space. Politicians are locked in eternally warring camps, stalemating the political process with their refusal to compromise or reach beyond narrow constituencies. Races are hopelessly divided on a widening range of social and civic issues. Authors have described the culture of victimization, compliant, and rage permeating almost every part of American life. But because our mass media shy away from such indictments, we don't have to acknowledge their sobering truth or do anything about them. And finally, from the book Virtuous Reality by John Katz, ascending media, from rapidly proliferating homepages to programs by Comedy Central, makes no pretense of being objective, comprehensive, or even substantial. And this, of course, is the ultimate in ascending media, because when I'm not busy merely giving my own unlearned commentaries on matters, I am busy reading from other people's commentaries. Oh, that's the 2-minute bell. That means it's time for me to go. And as sorry as I am to make my long-awaited departure, indeed, it is something of a relief. I am really, really bugged about this. So when you see me on the street, say hello. Bill Clinton, Don Nichols, Oklahoma, Cheyenne Arapaho Indian investigation circa Filegate. There's the phone. That's Margie. She wants to know whether or not I called. I'm not going to answer because I haven't called and I don't want her screaming at
Hi,
me.
it's 751-6715. Please leave a message after the beep. Thanks.
Well, this has been the last program.
Margie, this is your brother Dave.
Hello?
This is homeowner only. Call the Title I program. This program gives the homeowner the opportunity.
Hi, Margie. It's Auntie Betty.
This
This message is for Francis.
this ends
Calling to let you know that the
Cafe
has been
Cabaret.
killed. It's all over. There's going to be one final cabaret in November, first Saturday of the month. To come in and
Well, you heard it here first.